Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hearth of Thought, your podcast for conscious Pan Africanism. If you like these kind of conversations, please join us. Comment in the comment section to share your thoughts. Let's grow and learn together. And please subscribe and share our content so we can grow a stronger community of like minded individuals. In terms of digital transformation, we can see a fast acceleration of adoption of the digital tools across the continent, and around less than 30% of Africans today use mobile internet, and around 400 million people are connected across different digital devices. And this is according to a few estimates. And mobile technologies already contribute to roughly 8% of Africa's GDP, which is about 220 billion US dollars. So we cannot underestimate the digital economy and what that means for our growth. So social media adoption, be it messaging, be it using the tools as business tools or for cloud services or even for the government, whatever, everything digital economy. What does that mean for us and what does that mean for our future, especially when it comes to the concept of digital sovereignty? So this sparked my attention because the EU lawmakers are trying to adopt laws, or at least they're debating on how they can reduce their dependency on American digital products. The question they're asking themselves is, if our infrastructure and our data platforms are controlled elsewhere, what does that mean for our autonomy? And this is what the European Parliament is discussing. And my concern here is, if advanced economies are worried about their digital independence, or in this case, dependency, what does that leave for us as Africans? What does that mean in terms of where we're at and in terms of our foreseeable future? Because the lived reality as of right now is that most of our phones run through foreign operating systems, and most of our cloud services are foreign, or at least managed by some sort of foreign government or foreign company. Our social media platforms are foreign, our email services, our tools that we use in our businesses are all owned, and they're all foreign products pretty much. So the question I'd like to ask ourselves, are we building a robust digital economy for ourselves, or are we mere consumers? Are we just a market? We oftentimes are recipients of the products of other economies, and we're not contributors. So are we building a digital economy for ourselves? Are we building a digital independence, or at least a quasi digital independence for ourselves? Is this something that our governments are thinking strongly about? Because this conversation isn't anti-technology. It's not anti-adopting one tool over another. It's about power, it's about jobs, and it's about our development. So because we're in an AI driven era, economies are fastly adopting different levels of AI, and we, in terms of the infrastructure that we have or do not have to be able to anchor all these things, would make us consumers. Let's understand the terms here. What is digital sovereignty? What does it actually mean? Digital sovereignty doesn't mean digital isolation, okay? It doesn't mean ban everything foreign. It doesn't mean only make African owned products, which we do not have the capacity to anyways. But what it means is to be able to strategically think about a few things. Where is our data stored, and how is it governed and by whom? What essential infrastructure is needed for us to be able to function under the laws that govern that digital space management? Can local firms build and compete with the existing products in the market? And is the value created in Africa, does it stay in Africa? And by value creation, I mean the foreign direct investments, or at least the people who are investing heavily on the continent. Is a value added remaining locally, or is it being sent back to where it's from? So digital systems are now economic infrastructures, right? People make money virtually. There's a whole ecosystem that is not very much regulated. Most countries are still trying to understand how to control that ecosystem. So if we do not own our platforms, it's going to translate into one thing. We're going to fall into the trap of digital dependence. And it's not going to be a simple trap. It's going to be an economic trap, because the digital space is an economic space, right? And what does dependency look like? Advertising revenue that's not staying on the continent, platforms that are not owned by Africa. So by virtue of the fact that we will be consuming products from elsewhere, job creation. We do not own any of these platforms. We do not have any of this infrastructure. So we're losing in terms of what would have been jobs or outcomes from this digital space. And that also means that, we're going to have policy constraints, because again, if the platforms aren't under any sort of control by us, then we wouldn't be able to develop policies or devise policies, or at least have local alternatives to these, because again, we're not in control of this infrastructure. And data is the new gold, right? The data mining that's happening, our data is going to be vulnerable. And what does that leave our governments with in terms of, incentives to how this data is being managed and how much control we have over our data? And whether we understand this or not, whether we accept it or not, the digitalization of activities in general has direct correlation with our development, because we live, again, in a digital world. So can adoption, without us transforming or developing our own digital ecosystem where we have somewhat of a control, will that help us in the long term? And as we consume digital products, we see one thing: well, it works. And oftentimes people would say, well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? If there's already a Facebook, if there's already a Microsoft Word, if there's already an Instagram, why reinvent the wheel? It works. The product already exists. It works. We're using it. Of course, we're not going to reinvent anything, but we have to decide what is too strategic for us to outsource permanently. And I'll take you a simple example of the TikTok. America decided that TikTok was a powerful tool. I mean, they didn't decide, it is a powerful tool. And they decided to gain more control of it, because why? Do you think it's just because they're trying to gain more market share, or they're trying to make gain from the digital economy, TikTok economy? It's about control. It's about power. It's about information. Of course, there's an economic ramification of all of this, but the main thing is power and digital sovereignty. So when I'm thinking innovation, when I'm thinking, the direction that we could go as a continent, well, why don't we innovate in the direction of at least creating some sort of sovereignty for ourselves? We have, engineers, we have people who are skilled in developing apps. Why can we not compete? Because again, before TikTok came in, people thought, well, Snapchat was cool, Instagram. You would always think, well, the market is too tight, it's too saturated, there's no room for new. But why have Africans not come up with a tool that can be marketed worldwide as well? So we're not saying do not use apps from elsewhere, but how do we also gain some sort of digital sovereignty? We've placed ourselves in a position where our barriers to entry are so high, and even if we were to break through infrastructurally, we do not have the capacity to contain some of these investments. And so that makes me question what our startups are there for, what the startups in Africa are actually doing, if not focusing on small scale projects. Again, nothing wrong with that, because we're trying to create jobs, but I'm saying we're not thinking sustainably. I look at China, for example, and the digital ecosystem is so tight that you cannot go to China and survive without downloading all the Chinese apps. Your Google Maps wouldn't work out there. You would need the local equivalent. So the key lesson, I'm not saying copy China and have only Africa, products. We don't even have the capacity for that just yet. But the question is, digital sovereignty is built deliberately. We have to be intentional about those things right now, because God forbid tomorrow something happens and a leader isn't happy with an African country, and then before you know, you can't access any of your tools, or they have access to all of your data because you get that dependency. Again, I'm circling it back to the argument we often have, which is, well, we're depending on the West, and people only think, well, the West is controlling Africa. But if they control your digital space, if they control all these other areas, you have little to no bargaining power. And if you want to break out of that, the barriers are high. And so I'm thinking, okay, what are we doing? What are our institutions doing? Of course, the African Union is, putting together different frameworks and different tools to coordinate the digital space, but it's still very much on paper. I know the African Union has the digital transformation strategy, which discusses data sovereignty and localization concerns, and the AU adopted the continental AI strategy in 2024. And there's also the AfCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has digital trade. Most of them haven't been ratified, or at least they're slowly being ratified, because we've not understood the full scope of what these entail. And again, the question isn't make an Africa everything. Do you need an Africa word processing tool, Africa, spreadsheet tool, email services, your own social media platform, and you can fill in the blanks. But we need to understand how much control we have or don't have on our digital space and the impact that would have in the future should we piss anyone off, right? And when your decision making ability is so limited because you're under such, control from everywhere else, what does that leave us? Again, we'll talk about the digitization of the public sector. It's slow, even though there's other advantages to a digital public service, but the major thing would be access to data. Who would be controlling it? Who would have designed those platforms? And how much control would they have over those platforms? And what are we doing about that? A lot of smart people out there in Africa. So the problem is in the skills. Maybe it is. I don't know. You can tell me in the comment section. Do we lack the skill to be able to develop? Maybe we're not at the level of creating mobile phones, but can we create our own, at least even just a social media tool that can compete with the rest? I don't know. I don't know why it seems to me that, our procurement policies, and by procurement policy, I mean that the government would have to put out requests, for local firms to be able to supply some of these services, especially digital services. So I strongly think that Africa needs to choose, between a few strategic pillars. We need public digital infrastructure that we control, data governance that we understand and master, cloud services that we control, procurement policies to be able to work with local firms to provide some of these services, and the skills that goes. So again, all these things would create jobs because, well, we would need engineers to build a product. We would need firms to integrate the systems. We would need, different services to ensure digital efficiency. Even in terms of the legal field or the policy field, we need people that understand or that can propose, better strategies and tools and laws to be able to control the digital space, or at least to create laws around the management of the digital ecosystem. So why aren't we thinking in that direction in order to, create a more diverse and robust digital ecosystem for Africa? Because everything is being imported and whatever gain happens is sent back to where it's from. So where does the profit go at the end of the day? It doesn't stay on the continent. Who controls the standards? Not us. How resilient will our systems be under pressure should we need to? That doesn't seem to be a question we're ready to answer just yet. So digital adoption and ownership can become digital dependent, which not can become, it already is. And at a continent level, a few initiatives like we just listed, the trade protocol, there's the Malabo Convention on Cybersecurity. These things have entered into force, but ratification is still very much limited. The governments are not adopting these laws. So although some states are reinforcing some of these things, it's important for us to understand that even if we see headlines that suggest, digital ecosystem, digital hub, tech hubs for Africa, we should understand that the World Bank data and other reports still rank Africa as the most impoverished region. Okay, 500 million people in Africa still live in abject poverty. So innovation hubs, the hype behind all of these things is only good and true for a few people and a few areas. We need to think sustainably. We need to think long term. We need to think general interest. We need to think growth. We need to think sustainable future. And most importantly, we need to understand that because again, people like to talk about colonization, but neo-colonization, especially today, is only happening from a trade perspective. It's happening in a digital angle. So if your digital space is being controlled, isn't that some sort of digital colonization? We do not regain some of this power, or at the very least be contributors in the market. If for some reason tomorrow we can't access Microsoft products, what does that leave us with? Do we have local alternatives? Are our skills strong enough to enable us to create such local alternatives for ourselves? And that begs the question, do we have the skills to even develop some of the basics? Those are things to think about, because innovation is only nice when you talk about it from a siloed, or you just saw a little project that had some innovative aspect to it. But when you think about it in the bigger scale of things and in the whole economic machine, are we really operating in a direction that would ensure sustainability? Because like it or not, some sectors feed on others, and some things have to work first for the rest to work. And I think that's why we're not seeing significant growth across the continent. And that's why we should approach these topics with critical thinking and with full understanding of what's actually going on beyond the head, beyond, oh, this project was inaugurated, this project was launched, this happened, that happened. Yeah, those are nice, but in a cohesive manner or in a long-term sustainable fashion, are we developing in a way that would ensure significant growth in the future? Let's think about these things. So just let me know what you think in the comment section. Drop your comments. Let's discuss, let's debate these ideas and understand where we're headed. And it's important for us, especially and I say this all the time, when we, the younger generation, get into a space where we can make decisions and hold some degree of power, these are the directions that we should be headed, especially understanding this. So thank you for watching today's video. If you like, please comment, share, and like. And until next time, please stay well.